Let's have a look at the situation in Sudan, should we, where British diplomats and their families have been rescued from that ongoing violence there. The Prime Minister confirming that actually we've had boots on the ground, military in there, trying to get these people out.
Well, there have been problems right across the North African country in the last week due to a breakaway military unit beginning a coup against government forces.
France and the United States have also got their diplomatic corps out, but thousands of their citizens, along with Brits, are still there and they're feeling pretty stranded.
Well, let's speak now to the chair of the Defence Select Committee, Tobias Ellwood. Good morning to you, Tobias. Look, there'll be lots of people in Sudan, British citizens, who will look at the removal of the diplomats as an abandonment of them. They are there to protect them and ensure their safety. And how can they do that if they're not in the country?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, well done to the government for getting that operation up and running. It came from the Cobra decision by the Prime Minister involving a lot of Tier 1 UK military assets, 16 Air Assault Brigade, for example, 14 Air Commando and the RAF. But you're absolutely right. We now need to move on to phase 2, which is getting the British nationals out, the passport holders, the expats, all those people that do not feel safe. I reckon that there's at least a couple thousand that need a safe passage out of the country. And I hope that when the statement that we're going to hear today from the Foreign Secretary and possibly Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, that we will now get instructions. I have a constituent myself whose mother is stuck there as well. The situation is getting very dangerous indeed. The absence of electricity means it's difficult for communications. The temperature is in the 40s as well. And the street fighting means it's very unsafe everywhere you go. If we don't have a plan put together, a recognition of where and how the expats need to get out, they will start taking things into their own hands, determining that it's too dangerous and try and make their own way to the border. And that, of course, could lead to some very difficult situations. So it is important that we see clarity on how, now that the diplomats are out, how does everybody else get out?
And can I just ask, Tobias, I mean, is that the normal order of events? You call it phase 2, getting citizens out, but wouldn't actually the diplomats normally be the last people standing? Is that not how it should be?
You raise a very important question, and at the moment, because I don't have all the answers, and this is a very fluid, fast-moving situation and very complex, it would be wrong for me to make judgment, but you're right in what you say. There should be some tandem in the thinking, in the operations as well. If you've mobilized this many military troops and to the others, to East Africa, they should be there deployed also to get our nationals out. I should add that it's not just us, it's Spanish, Italians, the French, Germans, and the United States. Each of them have put their own elite forces together to get their embassies out. So we have a lot of forces that could collectively create some form of protected land corridor or gain an agreement, put pressure on those two warring factions that you mentioned to have a pause, a ceasefire, so we can get the internationals out of the country.
Yeah, and as you say, we're expecting a further statement this afternoon, so it'd be good to get some clarity on that. Can I ask you about the Diane Abbott situation? What do you make of that? I mean, I guess there's John McTiernan, who you'll know, on this morning, saying, well, look, she's apologised, she's retracted those comments about the Jewish community, so therefore everything's all right, you should forgive and forget.
No, I don't think you can forgive and forget. I have to say that I'm not close to this story at all. I've been focusing 100% on what's happening in Sudan. So forgive me if I can't give you an answer. I would hope that she would stand up in Parliament, seek permission from the Speaker to give an apology in the chamber, because what she said, from what I understand, is quite outrageous. And I'm pleased to see that Labour, who have struggled a little bit with anti-Semitism for some time now, not least to remember all the stuff to do with Jeremy Corbyn. He was then thrown out of the party. So I'm pleased that Labour have taken action very, very swiftly indeed. But apology in the chamber would make very good sense indeed.
Do you think there is... I mean, John McTiernan's saying there should be much more... within politics as a whole, there should be much more of an idea that if you apologise for something, then you carry on, rather than sort of being hung out to dry, if you like. I mean, that doesn't really happen at the moment in either of the main parties. Do you think that would be a welcome change?
Sorry, I don't follow your question. You're saying that once you've apologised, you then draw a line and move forward?
Yeah.
Well, in some sense, that can actually happen, but ultimately there needs to be some sort of sanction to say what has happened is so bad that there needs to be a reaction by the establishment, by the system indeed, because in some senses what she said was unforgivable and very, very ignorant indeed and harmful. And because of these things, just saying I'm sorry and then moving on is simply not enough. What happens is that there needs to be a period in which she's received some form of response by the machine from this, and at the moment that is being thrown out of the party, which I think is quite right.
Just finally, Tobias, since your focus has been so much on Khartoum and Sudan in the last 24 hours, I just want to ask you one more point on that. And I suppose there's real pressure on the British to get this right after the bungled extractions and evacuations out of Kabul in Afghanistan. What happens, and is it a possibility that British citizens will be left untended to by the authorities? Because I believe there's only one airstrip that's open at the moment, incredibly complex situations on the ground, and lots of British people saying they haven't even been in touch with the embassy. Is it foreseeable, possible, that there might not be any assistance provided to British people there?
You raised some very, very important questions, and there'll be a lot of MPs, such as myself, as I said, who've got constituents that are stuck in there that will be asking these questions. I should emphasize that we have some of the most elite armed forces in the world. We have airplanes that can land on roads, on very simple landing strips. We have rotary systems, helicopters. There's a large US presence in Djibouti, not far away. So allies are there as well. What we require is a clear-cut plan as to how to get British passport holders out. If that plan does not emerge today, then individuals will then lose faith and then start making their own way back. If I may just make a final point as well, is the bigger cause to this war and what's happening in Africa. Both sides of this conflict, the armed forces, the Sudanese, and indeed this rapid support force led by General Hemedti, have received funds and weapon systems from Russia, from the Wagner Group. And the Wagner Group is there to exploit Sudan's gold to fund Russia's war with Ukraine. There is a bigger picture here that we need to get our heads around.
Yeah.
Very briefly, did your emergency alarm go off yesterday, or were you one of the 10 million who didn't get it?
No, sorry, my alarm did go off, and I should stress that somebody that spends a lot of time looking at our resilience. I just touched on what Russia is up to in Ukraine. We have moved into, the character of conflict is changing. The way that Russia is going to upset countries, including ourselves, means that we need to be better rehearsed, going back to our Cold War mentality and being able to work together and be able to respond together as well. And that includes how we as civilians all act and are better informed to avoid panic. So I'm pleased that we're stepping in this right direction. I think it's very good that we've done so. Perhaps we should have done it given the technology and so forth, without impeding on people's individual sort of personality and protections and freedoms, that we should have taken advantage of the technology that we all carry and walk around with us all the time.
Well, it needs finessing, certainly, doesn't it?
A little
We haven't
bit,
quite nailed it yet. Tobias Ellwood.
This is why, can I just say that you say it needs finessing. That's why you test these things. That's why you get it right.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Tobias Ellwood, fantastic to get your thoughts. Thanks very much for joining us this morning.